to my channel where we question everything. Today's topic is politics, and the subject is why our leaders in the West so stupid. Now, before I actually start, this is a rant and a search for, well, to make basically sense of the whole matter and ask ourselves, why are our leaders so stupid? And it will probably be a multiple part series. I don't have the answer really. I will try to make some sense, but it's a very, very complicated situation. And personally, I have to admit, I don't know. For me, it's still a theory. I don't have the complete picture, and I might be totally on the wrong path. So whatever I say, you have to take with a pinch of salt. Don't criticize me that I am jumping from the one subject to another, or, well, as you listen, you will get the drift. But again, I don't have the whole picture. And it doesn't mean that I know what is going on. So I'm presenting a theory on why I believe our leaders in the West are so stupid. So let's go. Firstly, I don't believe that our leaders in the West are stupid. You can talk about Biden, Joe Biden, and he's a very old man. It looks like he's losing his mind or his memory, and that could be dementia or whatever. But the leadership of the Americans in a recent couple of elections since 2000 have proven to be a little bit, I would say, not very intelligent, except maybe Obama. And Donald Trump is also not stupid, but he has his weak points, and I will come to that. Neither is Scholz, or Baerbock, or Macron, or even Boris Johnson, or very stupid. They are, and I believe, have an intelligence that is about average. Otherwise, they would have never come to it. They have to have some form of intelligence. Now, intelligence is not always measured in terms of mathematics and science and so on. You do have to have some different skills as well. An artist that is very good is also an intelligent person. He might not be good in math, but he's good in art, and therefore his artistic intelligence is very high. And so you have people in politics as well. Now, for me, all politicians lie, without exception. They have to lie. That is unfortunately part of their job. If you say you have 100 people, then there will always be some of those people in the 100 that won't agree with what you are saying or planning to do. And then there's a bulk of the people that might support you. But you have to satisfy, and then other people that actually demand certain other actions. Now, how do you as a politician gel the 100 people and their expectations and their needs and so on? So sometimes you have to play the game of politics, which means lying to them. Smooth talking, making promises, in order to satisfy the needs of these different types of people. So I know I am the same thing. I hate them when they lie, but you have to see it in the context. They know precisely what they are doing. They say, if Olaf Scholz says, yeah, but while we say Germany is destroying themselves and shooting themselves and food and so on, and why can Olaf Scholz not see it, and why is he allowing it and so on, is because we don't have the whole picture. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes. Same as a lot of pro-punters and Western narratives always talk about the Russian military objective in Ukraine, how they make assumptions, they make predictions, and why, like the Kiev offensive at the beginning of it was a failure of the Russians, but nobody knows what were the plans of the Russian military command. Nobody knows it because you don't. That information is, you don't have access to that. So the same thing is actually applying to all our scrolls as well. One really has to ask yourself is, what is the real purpose behind that? And that real purpose is still evading us. But Olaf Scrolls knows, he's not dumb. He knows precisely what is happening. Now I will give you a good example. I wanted to actually make a separate video about that, but might as well discuss it here. Is that when we now have the election of Giorgia Meloni in Italy. And she's from the right wing, and we thought that, in the video that I made I thought that she's going to be one of the persons very similar to Le Pen and would have an Italix or Italian Brexit type of thing. And she will confront von der Leyen and basically upset the apple cart. She was originally pro-Putin, and she understood why Russia took away Crimea. And then suddenly when Russia invaded Ukraine, actually started the military operation, she suddenly turned against Putin and against the war, forgetting all her previous views, forgetting all the ideas that was in Donbass, forgetting all the other wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and suddenly she turned on him. And now she's pro-Union and pro-NATO and anti-Putin. Well, the question is why? Why did she change her mind? Because we don't really know what's happening behind the scenes. The famous statement by Ursula von der Leyen is, if Italy doesn't conform or the new party doesn't conform, then they have tools to remedy that. Now, we can debate about what tools were, but the biggest example was basically Greece in 2015. When the Syriza party was in control and Varoufakis was the finance minister. And if you have heard a lot of his videos and so on, they came up with all these plans, but Germany, Merkel, and the other friends and so on just said no. That's it. And Greece could achieve nothing of their plans, couldn't convince the leadership of Europe to follow their arguments, and because they insisted on austerity measures, and these guys won the battle. And the same is going to happen to Giorgia Meloni. Italy has a GDP debt ratio about 150%, and the banks are not in a good situation. And since Ursula von der Leyen is part of the European Union and they basically control the ECB and so forth, or they have a huge influence, well, she will have to toe the line. Because otherwise, I think the Duran said, the ECB will forget to buy Italian debt when there's issues. Remember also once when Angela Merkel was in control of Germany, they came up with a certain policy or whatever, and masters of the world didn't like it. And suddenly when Germany decided to issue bonds, then nobody wanted to buy German bonds. And that was a signal that the financial world, the people that pulled the strings, it was a lesson for Merkel, and then she changed it, and then the next issuing of bonds, the government bonds, was fully subscribed. Well, that's how it works. So there's a lot of things that we don't really understand. But this is only part of the current situation. One has to go back into history, and that is where my theory gets into it. Now, we can go back 50 years, we can go back 100 years, we can go back 150 years, 200 years, doesn't matter. But I would like to go back only till about the Second World War. Because those are the most recent events. Yes, events before that also had an influence on the whole matter and on the theory, but not to the same extent that what happened from the end of the Second World War. So don't get me wrong about that. The point here is that after the Second World War, there are actually, okay, again, like I said, this is ranting, and there are multiple factors that will influence it. So you got to bear a little bit and be a little bit patient. The first object that I saw is that America and the Allied forces then won the war and effectively conquered or destroyed Germany. And immediately after that, the Russians, Soviet Unions, and the West then became adversaries. But what did come out is that America came out as the industrial power after the Second World War. And what happened is that the US dollar was made international reserve currency by the Bretton Woods Agreement, if I have it correctly. But the US dollar was pegged against the gold. So what you could do is you can exchange US dollars for gold. And that was, in respect, a fairly good arrangement. So at this stage, I'm just going to talk about the financial situation. What then happened is that the dollar became distributed or got distributed around the whole world, and all the central banks started to stockpile US dollars as a reserve currency together with their gold because they have to trade and so on. And the dollar became entrenched in the financial system. Now in 1719, then there were some other happenings like the wars in Vietnam and Korean War and so on, which increased the debt level or created a lot of debt for the American government because they had to finance these wars. And then they had to issue dollars, and dollars, like I said, are redeemable for gold. And when in 1972 France wanted to exchange their dollars for gold, Nixon said no. And then they decoupled, or was it 71? They decoupled the dollar from the gold. So now the US dollar has become a pure fiat currency. But it helped them because they were already distributed all over the world, and they were part and parcel of the financial system in the world. So nobody could really go and badmouth them or say no, because they had to lose a lot of things. And thereby the world financial system accepted the dollar, even when it was not pegged against the gold. And actually, that was the one part. The second part is that the military might of the Americans were significant, so they could enforce or threaten the world with that. And then soon afterwards, there was the energy crisis or the oil crisis or whatever. And then there was an agreement made between America and Saudi Arabia, where the petrodollar was basically created. Now that again entrenched US dollars in a world financial system. And this is a very, very important part and change that happened. What it actually made it possible is that everybody had to buy dollars. And it gave the American US dollar an unfair advantage in the global financial system. Usually when a country prints money, then it creates inflation. Inflation and printing money has a direct correlation. Yes, there are other factors that can lead to inflation, but that's one of the main reasons. But this was not the case with the American dollar. America could print money, the world had to buy it, and then the world had to absorb the created inflation, well, the supposed inflation of the American dollars. And because there's another factor about the American economy, which I will address just now. The point here is that the rest of the world became sponsors of the American economy and the US dollar. What that in effect meant is that the Americans have effectively colonized the whole world through their financial systems and through the global reserve currency, the US dollar. And American inflation was exported to the rest of the world. You will also find out that there's usually a huge balance of impayment that was created, that between America imported more and it was exporting sometimes. You can also look at the way that the American GDP is set up and how it is calculated. It's not that America produces a lot, well, at this stage, but they take the turnover in South African companies as part of their turnover, which is not the right thing to do. Goods are produced here in South Africa, that means that's South African GDP, it doesn't become part of American GDP. But in any case, and also investments went to America in the stock exchange and all the other stuff that goes with it. And basically all the dollars had to go through American banks for any transaction worldwide. So they had a lot of control over the flow of so it gave them a huge advantage of power, financing, means of financial manipulation, etc., etc., etc. And just for instance, it's like let's take China as an example. So China exports all its production goods to America because America has a perceived wealth and a lot of money, so they buy that. And then they sit with a dollar. What do they do with the dollar? They buy American debt, government debt, or they invest it into company. Then the US government takes that debt that he has created and finances his military. And then with his military, it sort of attacks China. Okay, it doesn't do it at this stage, but you get the drift. It's like, say, a smaller country like Thailand or Iraq. So what the other worlds have, the colonized rest of the world have actually done is they have financed their own destruction by financing the American military. So I'm just talking currently about the financial system, about the dollar, which is a very, very important thing. Then what also happened is that I think it was in 53 or 56, I can't remember, is that, maybe a different date, I'm very bad with dates, is that the Americans created a different economic model. And today we know it as consumerism. What it actually means is that, I can't remember the guy's name, he created this model that we would like to advertise you in order to entice you to buy today a kettle or a car, and you drive it it's a new thing, it's a flashy thing, and they work on your want for it, and you buy it, whether you need it or not. And then after a year or 2 years, they bring out a different model that looks nicer, really nicer and so on, or has better functions and so on. And then you throw away that original one that's still working perfectly, and then you buy the new one. And this becomes a cycle. That means they constantly market to you new products, entice you to buy it while the old stuff is still working, but it's a form of consumerism. And the way that it works is that the more you buy, the more the companies can manufacture. And if they manufacture, they create jobs. And if they create jobs, they create salary. And with the salary, you buy the new product. That is how the economy works and how the model works. Now, if you look at the Soviet Union, they didn't have that type of model. Whatever they designed or built had to last. You can buy a washing machine in the old Soviet Union, and it will break, say, after 10 years, but then you can repair it and it will last another 10 years, and you can repair it and it will last another 10 years. Why? Because of resources. The access to resources were less than Americans. Americans had lots of access to resources. When I talk about the resource, I'm talking about metals, energy, all the other stuff that goes into producing these type of items. And that's why America, with its little population, is consuming the bulk of the world's resources, minerals, and energy, and so forth and so forth. Now, in principle, there's nothing wrong with the economic model. It's just that the two different models have developed. And actually, the same is applicable to Europe. So when I talk about America, I partially talk about Europe as well. And that's why the rest of the world has basically stayed poor, because they were in a form of financial colonization, which was controlled by certain organizations that the Americans controlled, like the IMF Bank and the World Bank and World Trade Organization and Human Rights Organization and all these other organizations. They're all controlled by the Americans. But just remember, it was a slow process. You started off in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and goes on. So the whole model about consumerism then was created. And then the third pillar of my theory is basically that technology. Technology had a huge influence on why we are today where we are. Now, we started off, well, radio was before 45, but we talked about television. Television increased marketing capability, and by marketing capability, you could stimulate economies and consumerism and so forth and so forth and so forth. And later we got the internet. And as we all know, the internet is one huge marketing tool. Everywhere where you go, you watch adverts and adverts and adverts, and basically that's what it's all about. No, it's not all about the internet about, but it plays a huge part what is being displayed on the internet. There's a lot of information as well, but I'm not talking about that now. In any case, so we had the advent of the television, and then it increased the marketing capability, and so. But there's also another thing that came together with it. That became entertainment. And with entertainment, Hollywood could expand considerably. And what are movies? They are nothing more than sublime ways of marketing, number one. There are also sublime ways of indoctrinating people, and there are also a sublime way of distributing your own thoughts and culture. So when the television was expanded across the whole world, suddenly America got an opportunity to use this technology to promote their own views and propagandize it. Sublime, eh? You won't notice it. Picture of Hollywood, heroism. Americans always win the Second World War. They are the heroes, and they are the super soldiers. They are whatever you want to call it. The American way of life in terms of family values and all this other crap that goes with it. But I'm not going to talk about that because that is something different. Like I said, you can talk here for weeks and weeks, and I can discuss everything like that. but later on it will become confusing. So then we had, like I said, the television, and that gave them a huge opportunity to expand across the world and influence it. And together with the financial strength of the dollar, there was a lot of money available in America itself. And it was so much money that they invested a lot of in R&D and developed technology that gave them an edge on the rest of the world, where the countries unfortunately couldn't print money and couldn't spend as much of their GDP on research and development, and therefore the rest of the world lagged. Now, I just want to say something. If I'm here in South Africa, there's no ways I can get venture capital. If I have an idea, like Elon Musk, you have to go to America. You can't start it in South Africa. Firstly, there are no true angel investors, and then there are no venture capitalists. And if they want a venture capitalist, they want to finance you. Once you have already established your whole business, then you don't need them anymore. And then they want to take more than 50% of your company. But if you give it to America, there's so much money available and so many angel investors and startups and so on that, yes, you get an opportunity to create something. And that's how Facebook was created, and Netscape, and we had the .com bubble in 2000 and so forth. But there was so much money available, which was financed by the rest of the world, that, again, America used that money in order to improve technology for themselves, intellectual property, and thereby being able to suppress development in other countries as well. And then the West made one big mistake. They created the internet. Now, in principle, you can understand why they created the internet. It's again a marketing tool, a means of influence the world, communication, wada. Yes, you can see it. But then the consensus comes, you cannot control the internet. You cannot control information. And that became a huge problem. So, but I will stop there right now, because I will first go to something else. Now, basically there was a change in culture, Western culture. Western culture has gone through a transformation, a significant transformation. In the 40s and 50s, you still had ideas like families, patriotism, honor, honesty, and hard work, and those principles. Yes, at this stage, gayness wasn't that prominent. Gender issues were not a problem. Abortions were not tolerated, and stuff like that. And the religion still played a huge influence. But unfortunately, all that has been destroyed. And it was done deliberately. You had to get a compliant population. You had to somehow be able to control the population. And how do you do that? Well, in my opinion, it is a question of that you have to destroy the pillars of society. And what are the pillars of society? Well, the concept of a family, religion, ethical and moral values. Because those are the pillars that actually guide every person on earth. And it's an anchor in its life which you can always go and review whenever has the falter. And by destroying them, you have made them free-floating people with no strong principles, no anchors in life, just going with the flow. And that is why there was a slowly breakup or change in the culture of the Western world, in America, which was exported to the rest of the world, effectively. And that was done deliberately. And the question is why? And that's why I came to the internet. How do you control the internet? You can't control the internet per se. So what you do is, you buy up all the media. All right, I'm ranting now here because it's a little bit more complicated, and I'm picking here and picking there. Is that, so how do you have to control the masses, and you have to control the internet. And what you are doing is now you are destroying the fabric of your culture. You're making the people have no principles anymore because they have no family or guidelines that can show them. They have no morality anymore because you have destroyed the religious concept. And basically everything that gave a person meaning. There's no more like something like patriotism or nationalism or whatever you want to call that. Being proud that you are a specific nation. And then basically now you can mold them. And that's where that's why it's so prominent, like feminism, gender identity, religious conflicts. I mean, how does the Christian support the Muslim religion and actions, or they support the Jewish religion, which is contrary to their Christian, but they do that. See how it all doesn't make sense. And well, now you have a population you can mold, and because you control the media, you can generate certain narratives. And again, you have this is much more complicated, but that's why you have something like cancel culture. Cancel culture, together with controlling the media, you can control the narrative, and thereby you can control what's happening on the internet. Those are the rough guidelines. So anybody that wants to go on the internet and go find out what is the alternative view, like say what's happening now in Ukraine and why did Russia, they can read it. But as soon as they read it, they either are so brainwashed that they will attack it, or what they will do is they will try to explain it to their friends, and their friends will reject it and they will be cancelled. And the most typical example is Elon Musk. Typical now, where he made up his mouth, made a proposal. That proposal went against the narrative in the media, and the pundits quickly jumped on him, and he had to retract whatever he had to say, and now he's funding Starlink again. You can look at the letter of the 30 Democrats that they wrote in order to ask for negotiations. Yes, I know the content is a little bit well, I'm not going to talk about the content. But how long did it take before they retracted that whole letter? And that was basically pressure from the internet of all the brainwashed people that only allowed a certain narrative, and by the media. And this is how you control the narrative on the internet and the dissemination. Apart from that, naturally, we also have to include Facebook and Google and Twitter and all the other social networks. They also have a huge influence, and they are, in my opinion, part of the media. So that's why I didn't mention them separately. But it has a huge influence. But even if you look at, just going a little bit back to Facebook and MySpace before that and so on, Facebook is a toxic platform. Yes, the intention were very good, make no mistake about it. But it has evolved into a photoshopped, same as TikTok and so on, a Photoshop type of videos, which has become unrealistic. And then these people are bragging to their friends on what they all did and so on. That creates jealousy. And as there's a jealousy and so on involved, and that breaks down the self-confidence of the other people, which is then part and parcel of the destruction of the culture, which I've mentioned, making people float in the ether, if you want to call it like that, become unprincipled, and you know, the wickedness of the people actually was exposed by Facebook. Not Facebook per se, but the effect that was created. Well, the bottom line actually is that Google and all the other social networks do control us. And a friend actually made a comment about how the Western cultures was exported to the rest of the world and what influence it has. And he actually mentioned you can go to any city in the world, the center of that city, and they all look more or less the same. You have the McDonald's, you have the KFCs, you have the Cartier, you have whatever American brand you can get. That is what you will get in the center of the city. So whether you are in Bangkok or whether you are in New York, it more or less looks the same in the center. There's a little bit of change. People are not the same faces. There's a slight difference, but I believe you get the picture. If you also look at the liberals now with the the Russian mobilization, you will see the influence on the West, because the people that didn't want to join or didn't want to accept the mobilization, they fled over the border. Now, those are the typical people that have no more patriotism, or they have accepted the Western culture and they have left their Russian culture. And that's why they fled. And you can also see all the all the anti-Russian or the anti-SMO operation in Russia, of the Russians sitting in Moscow and so on, the more liberals, they are all westernized people. They have all forsaken their fatherland, if you want to call it like that. And this now brings me back to the story from cancel culture and controlling the internet. Now again, going back to the 50s and 60s, where, well, we had the Cuban Missile Crisis, and thereby that was nearly an Armageddon for the world, and was at the last moment it was stopped. And today's situation in Ukraine, which is supposed to also lead to Armageddon, nuclear war, and the pundits like to compare these two events. And unfortunately, I cannot agree with that. The type of leaders that we had in the 1960s are totally different than what we have today. We have also, I would call, the people still had patriotism, a sense of responsibility, humanity, empathy, and whatever you can think about how your granddad was. But now, you cannot say the same thing about these people. They have been so influenced by wokeness and the culture, cancel culture, and the ability to stand up for principles. And that is why we have currently the situation where we are now, where we had strong people in the 50s and 60s who had values, considerable values. We now have weak people who have no values anymore, and therefore can be manipulated. I just want to So now you have to ask yourself, but why is then Olaf Scholz destroying its own economy? Why is Joe Biden allowed to be the president of America? Why is the West destroying itself? Why is America supporting Ukraine? Well, that is again a complicated question. You have to now consider everything I told now before, from the financial aspects to the matter of destroying and changing the culture, to the stage where the people behind the scenes can control the narrative by implementing tools such as cancel culture, wokeness, and so on and so on. I'm sure that Olaf Scholz wants to start up the Nord Stream pipeline, but he cannot do it. You can look at everywhere. There's now a guy, well, what's her name? Tulsi Cabot? Well, no, Tabot. Come on, the name. The presidential candidate. Tulsi Tabot. She now left the Democratic Party. She couldn't take it anymore. There's a guy in Netherlands couldn't take his party's policies anymore. He created his own party because he was forced to constantly toe the line the party policies and party principles. Same happening in Britain. Got to follow the party principles. You got to be woke. That is how Liz Truss actually got at the head of Prime Minister. You can see in other parties in the Western world, there are people that are rebelling. That there are people that are actually opening their mouth. And they say, let's say Ukraine negotiations. And you want to negotiate, but they always have to add a little bit of jam or at the end of the speech in order to make the suggestion not that bad, because they know they're going to be cancelled or shouted down or suppressed. So for anybody that is against the party line has a huge disadvantage, and he has a huge battlefront. You can also look at all the pro-Russian type of punters. Most of them have been banned from YouTube and other systems. The guys that actually go against the narrative. So that's why I believe that it appears for our leaders to be stupid. But are they really stupid? What goes on behind the scenes? And as an alternative, I would also like to know or point out, when I talk about religion, I always ask the question, how is it possible that two professors, highly intelligent scientific persons, of the same, say, intellectual capability, why is the one a religious person and the other one an atheist? Why? They have the same, the one believes in facts and the other one believes in non-facts. When you look at the share index, there's always people believing that the share price will go up, and there's always people that say that share price will be down, and that's why you have buyers and sellers. When you go to the casino, the one guy will double up, and the other guy will spend 10%, or he set himself a limit, and then after that limit he will walk away. So the point here is that different people have different approaches to the same problem, and they have their own way of thinking that how they're going to solve the problem. The fact that we say that, oh, Olaf Scholz is Schulz, Germany is shooting himself in the foot, oh, they're going to deindustrialize, oh, this, no, that. What makes you think that you are right? just your opinion and your way of tackling a problem. The other guy has decided to double down and take his chances with that option. So let's look at, just for the sake, I don't say it's like that, but let's look at the impact of the sanctions. So firstly, yes, the sanctions have an influence or impact on the economies of Europe and America. But just remember, it didn't start there. Inflation started last year already, and that was more a result of the whole COVID story and so on, which can also have a certain reason why it was created. But I'm not going to go there now. So what has happened now is that, let's say I am a pro-Ukrainian punter. I am going with the narrative of the West. And I believe that, yes, we're going to be sanctions against Russia. We're going to cut off the gas. We're going to cut off the oil. We're going to cut off all the things. But I believe we can get all those items from different suppliers and sources. Going to take a little bit of time, but my sanctions only get, like the oil embargo only starts effect in 3rd of December or end of December. That date is still not clear. So I have about 4 months or 6 months of preparation. In the meantime, I'm buying a lot of Russian oil and then exporting it to my country. So I'm still buying Russian oil. So what now happens is that in Russian, I have a huge turnover now. The economy looks strong. They don't have the collapse of the economy, or it doesn't look like it, and so on, and everything looks fine. But now, as a pro-Western punter, I said, yeah, don't be bluffed by this. This is a short-term story. Wait until the sanctions kick in. Wait until the oil is cut off. Then suddenly, Russia will export no oil to Europe anymore, and its income will fall, and then we achieve our objective. That's one argument they might try to present. Or they can say, yes, these sanctions, they hurt us in the short period, but we will survive. We will be able to cope with it. We're going to restart our coal generation plants, and we will do this, and we will go and pressure China or whatever, or make a deal with him to supply us with certain raw materials, that, or Saudi Arabia with the oil or whatever. They have other plans. And that's why they're arguing as they are arguing. And the effect of the sanctions, they believe, will only have an influence on the Russian economy next year. And the year after that. That is how they probably argue. Do I agree with that? No, I don't agree with that. But that's not the point. The point I'm saying, I'm telling you what these people might think. Because you always have two sides to a coin. The one is a seller and the other one is a buyer. The one believes differently from the other. And that is why the situation we're in now, and that is why I say it's a more complicated thing. There are a lot of other factors that has an influence on that. As the American economy it's an artificially created economy. It needed the rest of the world to finance and subsidize the living standard in America. And America has exported its debt to basically the rest of the world. But unfortunately, debt has to be repaid at one single time. You cannot, it's like they say, it's a Ponzi scheme. And if you know what a Ponzi scheme is, you have to get new clients in order to finance. And it gets even more difficult and so forth. So this financial model that the Americans have finally created is not sustainable. And that is why they had to have hegemony type of approach. They have to control the whole world. They have to control and maintain the subsidies of financing of the rest of the world of the American type of economic model. That is how it works. It's not a hegemony in order to conquer other countries and to suppress them. It's not an ideological type of hegemony. It is a necessity for resources, and resources only mean not only mean material sources, but also financing sources, labor sources. That is what it's all about. But unfortunately, like I stated, in 2008 we had the financial crisis, and the West took the wrong turn, and they went and kicked the can down the road, and then the road came to an end, and that is what we have now. And that is why it's fairly existential what is happening now in terms of unipolar, multipolar world. Because they know that's the end of their financing model or their financial model. I don't see that they will be committed to NATO or America in the Ukraine. Ukraine is just a proxy, it's just a tool like they use other tools in other countries for their purposes. But in any case, I will stop here now. This is still a really rough idea, it's a rough concept, it's a rough theory. I will still work on it, and, but it will give you food for thought. Please subscribe to the channel so that we can do more. Spread or share your links to this video. And until next time, cheers.